Hello, everybody. Welcome to Paths at the Forefront. My name is Joel Roberts, and I'm the CEO of PATH. PATH is a statewide homeless services and housing development agency that serves 140 cities in California and 20% of California's homeless population. Today's episode is Ending Homelessness When Jobs, Homes, and Businesses Are at Risk. As if a health crisis and a racial inequity crisis is not enough, we're now experiencing a financial crisis. California's unemployment rate is at 13.3%. A year ago, it was at 4%. And at the peak during the Great Recession in 2008, unemployment was at 12.3%. Eviction moratoriums are beginning to end. Earlier this month, there was a study that revealed that an estimated 30 to 40 million people in America are at risk of being evicted. Businesses don't know if they'll be at full capacity, let alone stay in business. How can a restaurant return to full capacity if they have to keep tables at a safe social distance? It's becoming the worst financial crisis in most of people's lifetime. So what is happening, and what can we do to prevent an increase in homelessness? Or are we simply going back to the Great Recession times of lost jobs and mortgage foreclosures and rental evictions and businesses closing and homelessness increasing? Are we going to call this next phase in homelessness, Here We Grow Again? Today, we're going to talk a little bit more about this with experts and people on the front lines. And I want to turn to Jennifer Hart-Dietz, PATH's Deputy CEO and Executive Director, to kick us off. Jennifer?
Thanks so much, Joel. These At the Forefront episodes are so important in accomplishing PATH's mission to end homelessness for individuals, families, and communities. And we know that providing services and helping people to find homes is critically important. It's really the number one task we focused on. But we've also learned that in order to end homelessness, we need to change the system that is causing it. And that system includes the inflow into homelessness, which we'll talk more about today. At the Forefront is our way of educating you, our supporters, on the facts about homelessness and its causes, so that you can advocate for solutions to end homelessness, because we truly believe that everyone deserves a home. We hope that we're able to provide insights into what we are seeing directly on the front lines and from a big picture perspective, so that you have what you need as our supporters to help us move the needle. So today we have some amazing guests to speak about the issue. And to start off, I'll turn it back over to Joel to kick off our episode for the day.
So we're gonna start with, will people be forced out of their apartments? And we're really honored to have San Diego City Council member Chris Ward, who represents the 3rd District. In fact, he helped create the San Diego City Council Select Committee on Homelessness, and he's the chairperson of the San Diego Regional Task Force on the Homeless. San Diego is one of just a few regions in California where homelessness has decreased in the last year. And currently, Chris is campaigning to become the state assembly member for District 78. Welcome, Chris, to Paths at the Forefront.
It's great to be with you, Joel. Good to see you.
Let's just kick it off. Tell us when this COVID crisis started and the stay-at-home mandates started. We know local and state governments banned evictions. So tell us, did San Diego do the same? And do you think this was the right response?
We did. And first, before I dive into that response, I also want to thank Joel and PATH. Joel has been with me on the Regional Task Force on the Homeless, one of our many service providers that really help provide that policy and that direction for the San Diego region to try to do things better with national best practices, focus on housing as the end goal, focus on the clients as the people that matter the most. So again, Joel, for you and your team, thank you for all that you do. Of course, yeah, we have been just devastated as a community, and certainly those directly impacted with loss of income because of these times under COVID. And that immediately was present for those of us on the city council, needing to make sure that locally we were protecting people at dire risk, particularly those in the service industries and others that are maybe living paycheck to paycheck, from falling into homelessness, from losing that apartment, from losing that stability, particularly for families and others that may not have other options available to them. It was important that we actually got the right emergency response to keep people in their homes. So we did that in early March. It has been extended several times, and I know that there are different timelines on the federal, state, and local level, but for the city of San Diego's purposes and our renters, we do have a moratorium for evictions related to COVID loss of income that is through September 30th, and the repayment period for back rent would go until the end of the year. So
then how does it work, Chris? If I'm in an apartment and I lost my job or the restaurant closed, so I can't pay the rent. So am I living with free rent now, or how does it work?
Yes and no. So it is really important that people know that there still is a process. You can't just not pay the rent after the fact. You do have to let your landlord know in writing that you have lost a job. Just show something that shows that you have actually had that loss of income because of the pandemic-related economic impact. And that would then bring the protections under the local ordinance to you. If you don't do that, and you have to do that before the rent is due. Those that try to do it after the fact or try to make sure, or actually don't actually have a loss of income. We've heard anecdotally that some are just trying to get a free ride right now and they can't be evicted. The ordinance does not apply unless you still make sure that all parties are informed and that we're following the prescriptions under that ordinance.
So if I'm able to return back to work, I don't know if I can still afford to pay back, if it's 3 or 4 months rent. That's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money. It's a lot of money just for 1 month right now in the circumstances. Yeah. Right. But yeah, so that's why we have also a repayment period. You cannot be evicted because of lack of repayment now until December 30th under our local ordinance. That smooths that out over time. It still is going to be a huge burden for San Diego families and for working individuals here. That's why I was really trying to take some leadership role in providing rental assistance. The city received a huge gift back in April from the federal government, which was very flexible in how we could actually, as a local government, respond to COVID impacts. And I wanted to make sure a significant amount of that was set aside for renters that need to be able to clear the deck and pay that back rent. We were able to do that to the tune of $15 million for that first rental assistance program. And over the summer, we actually were able to get a lot of applications in. Unfortunately, more than 8,000 were received, when we know if the full $4,000 per household allotment was taken, that would only stretch to about 3,500 households. So we still have a huge demand out there. But we also know from that data, over half of those households have children. 1 in 6 have a person in the household over 62 years old. These are very sensitive and delicate housing situations that we cannot overlook and relegate to homelessness. That's why they receive priorities as well as a part of this program.
So, Chris, what happens if I'm a mom and pop business and I save money to buy a second home that I could rent out as, even income for me when I retire? So, in other words, the landlords or the owners of these apartments or homes that they're renting out, do they lose out? How does that work?
Well, so most of our rental units here actually are the mom and pops that you're talking about. And you're right, they have a mortgage to pay. And so to be fair, kind of on all fronts, how do we make the entire system work? I know there was some early talk by some of the finance institutions about forbearances, knowing that income was just decimated and not knowing where the economy was going to go. And we still have some uncertainties. They were working to make sure that they would just be able to delay payments without any impact on fees or accrued interest. That still shifts the burden forward. And so the state is working with Senator Tony Atkins and others on creative solutions that might look through state tax credits or other vehicles to be able to help to smooth that out so that the landlords would be able to reduce their impact and then pass on some of that reduced impact to the renters themselves. So there are multiple solutions that are moving forward, I think, at the same time. Not everything is connected yet. We still need to work on those things. But for the immediate, what I have in my control, again, as the federal government continues to debate the HEROES Act and possible additional rental assistance programs, we have a program up and running. So wherever we receive those allotments, including through private philanthropy. I want to give a shout out to Bank of America that just stepped up with $100,000. That's amazing, and that can easily help dozens of more households as well be added to our capacity. So we're looking for the additional funding as well, just to make sure that we're providing that direct relief and then helping others as more solutions come forward from the state and federal government.
Another one of our guests today is the vice president of Wells Fargo Bank. So you're putting a little pressure on her highlighting Bank of America. So September 1st is a big date for the state of California because their eviction moratorium would end then. I realize in San Diego it's the end of September. But what happens if these moratoriums end?
Then the protections are not there for the renters who might still be having a problem finding new employment or trying to go back to their jobs whenever those jobs reopen. That's dangerous. I think to some of your intro points, that might result in a wave of evictions, and that's unacceptable for those individuals. It's unacceptable for our society that we would actually induce and put at risk that many more people to homelessness. So we can't let that happen. We have to figure out together with landlords, with industry groups, with the public sector, with our housing commission and so many other partners, how do we make sure that doesn't happen?
So if you were to look in your own crystal ball and kind of see the future in a year from now, given all that's happened, how our country's responded to COVID, how we've had different stimulus bills, but they've run out, and these moratorium evictions, where do you see, especially the state of homelessness in a year from now?
Well, COVID aside, I would like to hope that much of the work that we've been doing together, Joel, as a region here, is starting to bear fruit. The work that we did through COVID to actually repurpose our convention center, consolidate housing specialists and public health nurses and everybody else that complements an individual's successful pathways. That has been wildly successful. We've had over 400 through that facility that have been placed into permanent housing. And then we're on the cusp of maybe another 300 or 400 with a Project Home Key dollars that were recently just announced, awarded to the city to be able to open up and convert nice motel units into SRO style living with supportive services on site. So there's a lot in motion right now to help those who are struggling. And then that opens up a lot more capacity in beds to get more off of the streets.
Let me just ask you one last question. And we're apolitical, so we're not going to encourage people to vote one way or another, but I know you're running for state assembly. So if you were in that position today, how do I say this? What would you do to encourage the state to, how should the state prevent all these people who are losing their apartments from becoming homeless? It's going to be
difficult, like you said, right? Because the state, like local government, we have to have a balanced budget. You cannot overspend, and the federal government has other things that are afforded to it to be able to provide mass stimulus, and that's what we're all looking toward. I would say I'm really encouraged by some of the conversation. The state deadline for legislative action actually is coming up soon on the 31st. It's under the Constitution and they have to get all the work done. But there is a bill in motion right now to work on further renter repayment issues and also some of the moratorium issues. For me, I would like to see for all parties that are affected by this some better certainties and guarantees. And I think that you tie that to some point in time in the future that is aligned with the taking away or the rescission of the governor's state of emergency, right? So we know we are still in that state of emergency and we will be for some time, but all these downstream effects and all of this planning that needs to go for renters, landlords, and others in the community needs to be able to tie that to some sort of certain time metric. And so that's why you have this disparity about what the state's eviction moratorium deadline goes towards, local, federal. We need to probably get all on the same page, figure out how this is going to play forward, probably into the next year. And hopefully if we're out of COVID infection rates sooner rather than later and reduce the state of emergency, we can begin to plan for that recovery and have predictable opportunity for all of these interests that San Diegans care about.
Thank you, Chris. We're really thankful that Chris was able to set aside some time to talk with us about this important issue. Councilmember Chris, I always call him Chris, but Councilmember Ward is been a real leader in the San Diego region on homelessness and other issues, and is becoming a leader in the state. So Chris, thank you very much for your time sharing with us. Now I want to turn it back over to Jennifer, who's going to talk about renters at risk.
Thanks, Joel. And I'm excited that we're going to be able to follow your discussion actually with some of our staff who are directly on the front lines, helping to prevent people from becoming homeless. So I'm excited to welcome Laura Sandoval, who's our Director of Programs up in PATH Santa Clara. I'm also inviting Anissa Lopez, our Case Manager for our Supportive Service for Veteran Families program in San Diego, and Ivan Lopez, no relation, who is with our Housing Prevention and West Los Angeles program. And we're going to start a little bit about talking about the current situation. Before I go into the renters at risk, though, I know there's huge fires raging up in Northern California, and they're particularly impacting our staff and our clients. Laura, can you start off by telling us how they're affecting those people living on the streets as well as our staff?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I'm glad to say that we've been able to confirm all of our staff are safe. But we do know even some of our colleagues in our partner agencies have been forced to evacuate their homes for their own safety. So this is something we know is really affecting everybody right now. Even looking outside, you can see the smoke and the air quality is really poor. For us, I think this has been another reminder about people lose their housing for a wide range of reasons, right? Like Councilmember Ward talked about, we know that, people are frequently 1 or 2 paychecks away from losing their housing. And right now we're seeing even environmental factors are causing people to have to flee their homes. I got to give a huge shout out to our outreach team for just a second, though, because even though the air quality is poor, they have remained dedicated going out and serving folks who are on the street. We're coming out of a heat wave. They're giving people water. They are providing masks and referrals to places that they can go indoors and just have a safe place to breathe. The air quality today, I think, is 160. For point of reference, it should be 0 to 50. Our folks on the front line are still out there serving. So we're glad to be there.
Thank you, Laura. And thank you for highlighting the outreach teams, because even though we are worried about their health, I know they're even more worried about the health of the people that we serve. So it's amazing to see what they continue to do. So now if we turn to renters who are at risk, let's start with San Jose, Laura, since you're primed and ready. Can you tell us a little bit about, do you think this is the calm before the storm? Meaning, are people fearful that they're going to lose their apartment?
Yeah, like was being discussed earlier with Councilmember Ward and Joel, just because there's a moratorium on evictions right now, a lot of people are concerned because it doesn't erase what past rent may be due. So there's a lot of fear out there. We've even seen some people who've opted to leave their homes for fear of accruing debt. I met a family recently who actually, family of 6. Both of the adults had been furloughed since the beginning of shelter in place, and they didn't want to acquire debt. And so they've been homeless and trying to make it the best they can through friends and shelters. So there's a lot of fear, but you know what? We're really glad that we have been able to partner with the city. We've seen this huge drive from both the public and the private sector to get ahead of this and make sure that there are adequate resources to support new people who may be experiencing homelessness for the first time. So we are going to be glad to start serving folks with different types of supportive services that are designed to meet the needs of people who may be experiencing homelessness for the first time.
Great, thank you. Now we'll head all the way down south, down to San Diego. And Anissa, similarly, can you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in San Diego and what programs we have there to help individuals who are at risk?
Yeah, so here in San Diego, from our program specifically, which is Supportive Services for Veteran Families, we do offer prevention services, which is meaning like we help any veterans and their families who are at risk of imminent homelessness and provide maybe rental assistance or financial assistance for arrears. What I've seen since COVID has hit is we have had an increase in those families reaching out for prevention services. Typically, we do rapid rehousing services. So most of our funds get allocated for those services. But with this at risk of losing your housing, and then unemployment rates just exponentially increasing, we have seen a growing increase of individuals reaching out to us and other veteran providers for this service specifically. Also in San Diego, I think something we've done that's really great is partnered with Head Bash. Like all of the veteran services are partnering together to get most of our veterans off the streets, especially those who are at high risk with some kind of autoimmune disease or just their age for COVID-19, that is. Now they are in motels, which we are able to pay for through the CARES Fund Act, and really expediting their housing with the vouchers and rapid rehousing as well. But it is an overall looming feeling here in San Diego, and I'm sure across the state and United States and the world as well, is that, what is going to happen after these evictions lift? What is going to happen when, even though it's 4-month period of trying to repay those arrears back, it's really tough. And so I know for us in our grant, we're truly trying to target how can we get our clients to afford to pay their rent, and offering financial services as well as financial literacy services. So it's more or less like how to partner with our clients to prepare for the worst that could actually happen. And of course, I think all of us in the service kind of expect to see homelessness increase in this upcoming years.
Thank you so much for that, and for highlighting that this pandemic is so unpredictable and we really don't know what the outcomes are going to be, but we do all know what the effects of homelessness are and how catastrophic. So as much as we can prevent, we need to. So next, Ivan, tell us a little bit about our programs in West Los Angeles and what you're seeing. Los Angeles is a big community, and I know you all are working hard to help as many people as possible.
Yeah. Well, in the prevention program, our aim is to assist individuals who are at risk of homelessness. And it really is an individual plan kind of situation. When we receive the referrals, we assess the individual's needs. And for example, if they receive a 3-day notice, we case managers can do landlord mediation and pay up to 6 months of rental arrears. If the individual has received an eviction notice, that's when we reach out for legal assistance, which we usually go through Legal Aid Foundation and Pathetic in West LA. Attorneys can mediate to keep individuals in their homes, and we can also plan to cover their expenses or their arrears. And they also do work on clearing their evictions from their records. Worst case scenario, if the attorneys aren't able to keep the individuals in their homes, they are able to clear the records of eviction, but it's tasked on us to relocate the individuals to more affordable housing. And at that point, it kind of shifts into like a rapid rehousing kind of situation where we do security deposits, furnishing, case management, 6 months of rental assistance, and moving expenses. So we do have a lot of bases covered that way. And my favorite part of prevention is that it's a collaborative program. We work with a lot of organizations, including City of Santa Monica, the Legal Aid Foundation, Pathetic, and Wise and Healthy Aging from Santa Monica, which I've worked closely, and we've had a lot of success because of all these organizations and agencies working together to keep people from homelessness.
Thank you, Ivan. Yeah, I think we always say we can't do this alone, right? And this is part of why we also started hosting these At the Forefront series, is because as our supporters, we need you all now more than ever. So Absolutely. For my final question for the full panel, What do you see? I know some of you shared about it in your thoughts and some fears that Anissa, you highlighted too, and pending doom, I think you mentioned, but what do you think is coming in the end of this year, next year? Do you see any hope out there?
Absolutely. I think everyone that's in this service, we're all looking ahead and wondering, like, what can we do as providers to prevent our clients from suffering and from really like having no other resources, right? Because we are their resource. Mm-hmm. So I think that just being strategic and partnering with other providers and having these kinds of discussions and saying, like, what do you think about, the next few months? Like, what is your program talking about? What are you going to do? I think those are all great starting points. I think the biggest thing that would be helpful is if we all had some like major increase in funding. But who knows if that's going to come through or not. But I just think that also being hopeful yourself as a provider and instilling that hope in your clients will help them with their mindsets and perspectives. So that's something that they really need in ourselves. We need like to remind ourselves like, hey, like we're in this work all together. So it could be any one of us that's hitting the streets, honestly, at this point.
I would agree with that. Like I had mentioned earlier, I feel like you've seen a lot of people all come together and see like this is a challenge. We're anticipating this challenge. We see it's ahead of us, but we're committed to wrapping our arms around our community and every single person who's in it and coming up with solutions and just working towards it. So I think the fact that we're having these conversations and there's so many people who are thinking about it and talking about it is a really good sign that we're committed and we're going to take this on together.
And I spoke with the SPA 5 prevention program manager, and they haven't seen a whole lot of referrals come for prevention, but they are preparing for the influx of people who will most likely be needing our assistance after the moratoriums are lifted. So we're preparing, and me as the case manager, we're up for the task for sure.
Well, thank you all so much for sharing, for the work that you do every day. And, you're needed now more than ever, but I know your passion didn't start with COVID. It started way before. So thank you so much. So Joel, I know I just asked kind of the team, is this the calm before the storm? But will you share with us, what are you seeing? What do you think is coming?
I definitely think there's the calm, and I think, the response to everything has been positive in terms of stimulus money to help people pay, to give money to people who don't have jobs, and the small business loans to keep some of the businesses to at least pay their payrolls, and then the eviction moratorium. So I think all that has kind of kept things, I think calm is probably too positive of a word, but the storm hasn't started yet. And I think as the stimulus money, unless the federal government funds more of that, but that's gone away, and the PPP, which is the small business loans, are finished. And then if these eviction moratoriums, I think it's not going to be good. I mean, if the experts say that 30 to 40 million people in America would become homeless right now, or at least pre-COVID, the number of people homeless in America was 500,000. So let's just say 30 or 40 million is wrong. Let's just say it's 3 or 4 million more people. That's still 6 or 8 times more. And even if you cut that in half, even if we double from 500,000 people homeless to 1 million people homeless, the system is not ready to handle that. Even if all the experts were wrong, the system's not ready to handle even 500,000 more people. But Jennifer, I worry a little bit just about the agencies like PATH, and in San Diego there's Alpha and Father Joe's, and Los Angeles there's People Concerned and Family in LA Family Housing, or in the Bay Area, BOA, and all these agencies. There's hundreds of them all over the state, including PATH. How do you think they're going to fare with this?
Yeah, I think it's hard. I think, what we've been all worried about is cuts, reductions. We've heard that there's a reduction in taxes, a reduction in tourism, and that impacts our funding. How are we going to continue to support our staff, let alone the people on our street we're so passionate about? But then on the flip side, there's this idea of all this additional funding and having to spend it really fast. And how do you build the infrastructure for this short-term investment and make sure that we still are following the quality of services that we all want to abide by, so that we don't just get people into housing, but we help them maintain and retain their housing.
And then there's unemployment that we should talk about.
And then there's unemployment. So that actually will perfect segue into our next group, which I'm really excited to bring on. So we know the devastating impacts that it can have on increasing homelessness, loss of income. Most people are living paycheck to paycheck, whether it's your friend, your family member, or your neighbor. And we've seen an increase in unemployment. So we're going to start out with a video so you all can see, our supporters, how this can really impact a person that we've served up in San Jose.
As you know, I opened a store in 2000 on Bascom, and that's when I started to do a lot of the projects and work. And when the mortgage crisis happened, I had to close the store. First of all, I went through the savings. After that, it was the occasional job. And it's kind of hard when you're using your van to live in, but you're also like delivering material. So if you open the back door of the van, it's pretty obvious what's happening. I think the first thing I noticed when Pat took over is that your commitment to each individual and your caring and your compassion, very, very important. What I really and truly love about having homes is coming to a safe and cozy place. The whole idea of going home, is just so heartwarming.
So this unemployment crisis that we're seeing, as Farhad mentioned in the video, it really can happen to anyone. And so I'm excited to bring on Nancy Wami, who is the Vice President of Investment Strategies for Wells Fargo's private bank. And when it comes to the economy, Nancy, you're a subject matter expert. You manage the portfolios, you coach the portfolio managers, and you analyze the risks. And I also know you've recently moved, so you also know how critical home is, and we're grateful to have you on today. And then I have Cece Garcia, who leads our employment program in Los Angeles. And Cece's been with us for a long time with PATH. And she actually can talk directly about kind of what she's seeing directly on the front lines. So first, let's go to Nancy. As a strategist, you're dealing with the economy every day, and COVID was so unpredictable. Can you tell us how it's impacted the economy and particularly unemployment?
Yes, so let's level set. Let's start where we were before all this happened. So because of slowing global growth and the trade war, job growth had actually slowed down a little bit. So the jobs we added in December were like less than half of what we added in January 2019. But at least we were still moving forward. We were doing good. We added 29,000 jobs in January and 29,000 jobs in February. And then COVID happened, right? And it was fast, it was swift, it was unpredictable. And, we all remember, the news on that day. We had shutdowns that happened, mostly starting the third week of March. And we had 3.3 million jobless claims nationally. For perspective, that is 12 times more in the third week of March than we had the previous week. In California, that was 3 times as much. We lost 100,000 jobs. And most of those were, hard-hit leisure, hotels, restaurants, were completely decimated. And it's because about 80% of household spending in those sectors went down 80%. So it's not hard to imagine how that happened. So unemployment went from 3.9 that Joe had previously mentioned to like 5.5%, right? Manufacturing, construction, government, and tech, fared pretty decently at this time. Then April comes. That was the bloodbath. We lost 2.3 million jobs in California alone, and 60% of that was in Southern California. But, mainly because that is where we had most of the infection cases. So the industries I had mentioned before, most of the carnage was there. But then something else also came up that was worrying. We started losing jobs in local government. We lost about 85,000 jobs there, which was really worrying, especially and this was a local government, mainly in public education. And if you think about small cities and small counties, your local government is your main employer. They don't have a diversified economy. So, when you have a lot of jobs lost there, there's nothing much else to do. And then at this time also the farming community started also getting affected. Between between February and May, the farming community lost about a quarter of the jobs that they had, at the pre-levels of February. Then we come into May, and there's kind of some few green shoots because we start reopening the economy, right? We are in phase 1 at this point. We gained about 237,000 jobs, and most of those were exactly in the industries that had been decimated, with the largest increase in Los Angeles, which is not surprising because that is where we had the largest number of jobs that were lost. But then while, that kind of translated across all the industries, local government is still not doing well. We lose another 96,000 jobs in the local government level, municipality level, and mostly in public education. That's where the carnage happened. Then we get, by now unemployment is about 15.5%. Then we roll into June, phase 1, phase 2-ish. Right? And I say ish because I don't know whether we completely, got there. And we had the largest addition of jobs in California's history, about 550,000 jobs. Exactly where you would expect that to be, where we had the largest job losses, restaurants, hotels, leisure. But it came at a really big cost because as most people went back to work and started interacting, we now had a surge of COVID cases. All the gains we had made were starting to go. And what happened, right? We got the economy jump started. We got a rise in COVID cases, and then we went to partial lockdown, right? So some of the gains that we erased start, going away. And by the time we rolled into July, we only increased about 140,000, jobs at that time. So things started slowing down because we are in a partial shutdown. And then we start having other problems too. We have heat waves. We have, fires. We've talked about. So far we have about 700 fires, over 1,700 structures destroyed, over 1.3 million acres destroyed. Where are these people going to go? They've lost home, they've lost businesses, right? So we already have a challenge, with social distancing and housing people. And we still don't have the employment numbers for that, how that's going to creep in yet. But, that is still going to continue being a challenge. So it's, we started, the green shoots started and then they became moderated.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Just to continue on that same thread, do you think these current unemployment numbers will, more permanently affect the housing market?
So when you look at the housing market, California is so large and diverse, right? And maybe, we look at it in two lenses. We have the renters market and we have the home buyers market, right? So what has happened in the renters market? First of all, the question is, who is likely to rent a home? The exact people who lost their jobs, right? You're more hourly and people in your gig community. So we have stories about some people who, think, I would rather quit my home than continue adding to my renter's debt. So in exactly that same path, so a lot of people have moved out, maybe with families, and especially in the largest metropolitan cities, LA, San Francisco, San Jose, New York, what you have seen, I mean, if you go to apartment.com right now or Zillow and look at the listing, there are a lot of listings. Landlords have slashed pricing just because there's been outflux of people. And then we don't know whether, some of these jobs, the employers may decide, well, you can continue working from home. So why would I rent $10,000 a small apartment in the middle of Manhattan, right? When I could do the same job and move to New Jersey for less than half of that for more space to accommodate working from home. So the apartment rental market will continue to struggle, and more so in the large cities. And especially because in the last 10 years, if you walk around the city, there's been a lot of additions to apartments, right? So while that has moderated, the projects that have started have to be completed. Who's going to rent those homes, right now? Now, the home buyers market is completely different, right now. So in March, in April and May, everything slammed down just because you couldn't carry out transactions, right? You could have home inspections, you could have open houses. And then after that comes June. And what happened? Things are off to the races. Home prices are up 6.4% nationally. I mean, if honestly, for context, in San Francisco, it's up 15% almost. In LA, it's up 5.4. In the Central Valley, is up 6.6. The fact that we have low interest rates doesn't help either, but it's because there was a lot of pent-up demand. And then there's this oxymoron. You have high unemployment, but you have high home sales. But when you think about it, who's buying these homes? People in the middle income, people high income earners, who so far haven't really been affected by COVID, just because they're in professional jobs that can translate to working from home. I mean, of context, homes over $2 million were up 57% in California. And that pushed the median home price by over 10% to about $663,000. So is this sustainable? No, we were satisfying a pent-up demand, but then what's going to happen going forward with home buying? We are starting to see people in professional services starting to lose their jobs, right? That didn't happen before, but it's starting to happen now. So we don't expect that to continue. We expect that to moderate. So if there's one thing at least to take from this is that it's going to depend, whether it's a rental market, whether it's a housing market, the location will really matter going forward, right? And right now, the most pain in the rental market will be in the high-priced cities, and that actually could affect also the home prices in those same areas.
Thank you for that. And then the stats that you have memorized really does show us how ingrained you are in this. And thank you. I'm going to turn to Cece for a minute. And can you, as Nancy mentioned, right, LA County was hit so hard with unemployment. I think the last numbers I saw in July were 17.5%. Tell us what you're doing with your programs and how you're helping people find jobs. Oh, I think you're on mute. I can't hear you, actually. No, we can't hear you. Okay, well then, Nancy, I'm going to go back to you for the final question is, what do you see are the solutions to unemployment during this crisis?
So, I mean, isn't that the age-old question, right? If we could have been, even pre-COVID, while we were doing pretty well, we still had an unemployment rate, even if it was as low as 4%. It's a really hard thing to do right now because we have a virus that's unpredictable. We don't know the trajectory of it. And right now, one of the things I think we can do, as most of the speakers have spoken, is kind of to stabilize people's into their homes, whether those are workers or those are business owners. The one thing that the federal government didn't do in the last crisis was move fast enough. So this time the Federal Reserve moved fast. It is the monetary policy. It lowered interest rates to zero. And then what it did is that it poured a lot of money in the financial markets to stabilize that. On the other side, Congress has poured, trillions of stimulus money, whether that is in, loans, whether that is in unexpanded employment. So, every speaker has kind of touched on that, unemployment and eviction, right? So if we can expand that and keep people in their homes, and at the very least, even if it's to pay partial rent, because in a rent, in the rental market, you have two sides. You have the renter and you have the landlord, right? So if we can do that, and then on the landlord side, we can continue with more generous forbearance and deferment programs to their mortgages, that will kind of also help. And then private companies such as ours and nonprofits such as yours have an even bigger job right now, right? So, and way before the COVID happened, Wells Fargo in 2019 announced that it was going to spend $1 billion in the next 5 years to help in housing affordability, whether that is foreclosures, whether that is temporary homes for people, whether that is financial literacy. And we've had a great partnership with PATH. Since 2019, we've donated about $476,000, more than 76% of that in LA County, just to help the homes, people who are the populations of people at risk. But also, I probably would have an ask for private companies and the donor community. So usually, organizations such as PATH, they rely a lot on donations. And sometimes what donors will do, they'll have stipulations to their donations. So probably, my ask will be for the donor community, please be relaxed in what you attach to your donations, just because at this time we want organizations such as yours, PATH, to do best what you do, right? And this year, Wells Fargo did donate $100,000 to PATH, and we didn't put any stipulations for it, right? We need to be flexible at this point because expediency is important right now.
Yes, and actually my close was going to be to thank Wells Fargo for their amazing donations before even 2019. You've been such a key partner. And with COVID, really one of the first to respond to say kind of what capacity needs do you have, what operating needs. We know that there's additional expenses. And so without your support, we wouldn't be able to be here today. So thank you so much, Nancy. And I think our tech got Cece back online. So let's give that another try. Yes, we can hear you. It's not a virtual meeting without some tech glitch. So
I know. I think my piece went to sleep or something.
Yeah, so go ahead with the question. Just tell us a little bit about the programs and how you're helping people who are experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles get employed.
No, definitely. So yes, we're continuing to facilitate the process for individuals to secure employment. The first thing we did is that we maintained our computer lab open, because while so many of our participants rely on Starbucks, the Wi-Fi, libraries, as those shut down, they didn't have that resource anymore. So what we did is we maintained computer lab open. Our employment specialists continue to assist with online applications, resume building, mock interviews, trainings, all via Zoom, and also in person while maintaining social distancing. We're also facilitating Zoom interviews. So some of our participants actually have interviews via Zoom. So we provide a safe, quiet, and professional office setting for them to conduct those interviews. We're also hosting virtual recruitments. So we reached out to some of our partners, and we get 10 individuals who are interested in that sector, and we conduct Zoom interviews. So that's really been really helpful during this time.
Thank you, Cece. And just since I get to see the employment lab and the people coming in and out, can you also tell all of our supporters, what have you seen in terms of the demand for our services during this time, our employment services?
Yeah, so while we see an increase in need, what we're focusing on is increasing those skills of participants. So if we can connect someone to a training. So if someone was previously interested in like warehouse, like Amazon started really hiring. So instead of just having an individual with no experience or no training, we put them through like a forklift training or security training, firearm. We had someone who completed Homeland Security training to make them more attractive to the employers in this much more competitive market.
Great. Well, thank you so much to you and to your team. And again, thank you, Nancy, for joining us today and for the support of all the Wells Fargo team. It really highlights the work that we all need to do together. Joel, I'm going to go ahead and send it back over to you.
Great. I just want to make sure we end this episode in a hopeful note. I know that there's some worries and concerns, and rightfully so, but just want to ask you, Jennifer, real quickly, what do you think are the most effective programs to prevent an increase of homelessness?
Yeah, well, I think the key, right, we all know that even becoming homeless creates such a catastrophe for the individual. So anything we can do to keep a person in their home, whether that means providing that past rental assistance, doing the mediation like we do in order to help families reconnect, that family reunification, anything we can do to stop homelessness from happening. If that was possible, that would always be my answer. But as people fall into homelessness, the quicker we can get them rehoused and stick to our mission, right, to end homelessness, the faster. So, you know, whether that's interim housing for the short term as they find the keys home. And as you all know, all our supporters know, we also build affordable housing. We need the whole pipeline, but we need it to move really fast so that people don't languish on the streets.
Thank you, Jennifer. That concludes this episode. I really want to thank all our participants from around the state who are experts and on the front lines of addressing homelessness and preventing homelessness. Definitely want to thank our community partners, Wells Fargo, Nancy, sharing with us. You can visit Wells Fargo online at wellsfargo.com. And San Diego City Council member Chris Ward, we're very grateful for him to be part of our episode. You can get to know him better at sandiego.gov. I also want to thank the Goalen Group for producing this. They've been longtime supporters of PATH. And next month, we will discuss how food programs became life-saving programs during this period of crisis. And we're calling this episode Comfort Food in Uncomfortable Times. And you can support PATH's efforts to end homelessness in your local community and across the state by visiting epath.org. Have a nice day, everybody, and please stay safe. And remember, we're not home until they're home. Bye, everybody.